All right, welcome back to the show. Another episode in the Elite Dangerous Beginner's Guide series. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of landings. I got a comment on one of the other videos asking to go in a little bit more depth about the various systems and how to avoid, slamming into a planet or really how to make the whole process just a little bit easier for you. So the first thing you'll notice is we are in a slightly different ship today. I am in my main account, and the reason why I swapped from the account that I was using for the other demonstration videos is simply because I felt like the only difference between that account and this one now is just grinding. And to elaborate on that, basically what I wanted to show you with that first set of videos is me literally going from having nothing, a fresh account, to being able to build whatever I want. And really the only difference between that account now and this account is just mining. I've done, I don't know, like 10, 15, 20 hours worth of mining in this account, and that's why I can afford greater ships. And I just kind of want to bypass that and get into some more in-depth nuts and bolts kind of stuff. So that's why we're in my main account today. I may switch back to that other one. We'll see if something... I can think of a couple of reasons to go back, but otherwise we'll probably be in my main account for the foreseeable future. Now, onto the meat of today's episode. I wanted to talk about the specifics of landing. And really, landing starts once you arrive in your target system. So when you arrive in your target system, you'll end up looking at a star just like this. I've just jumped into this system, Decat, which is where you might find Farseer Industries, which is an engineering system if you have the Horizons expansion. I may make a video on that later. But let's try and find a place to land. So here we have the Gare terminal. It's 65 light seconds away from the sun. So let's target it, assuming this is where we need to be. Now, if you look to the immediate left of my radar down there in the middle of the screen, you'll see a little circle with a blue dot in it. And that's actually your alignment crosshairs. So the ship's AI knows exactly where you are in relationship to that terminal. So now that it's right in the middle of that little crosshair, I know I'm perfectly aligned. If I raise it up, you'll see it sink down. And if I keep going, you'll eventually see that circle turn from a blue dot to a outlined empty blue sphere, just like that. And that means that I'm pointing in the wrong direction. So now that we know exactly where that station is in space, we're going to line up to it. And again, the throttle trick where you're in the blue, it works in Super Cruise just the same as it does in regular impulse space. So now that we're aligned with this terminal, let's talk about the rule of 6. Okay, so when you're flying at a orbital body, let's call it, you'll see that we have the distance to the target beneath the name, and then that 5.9 days, that's how long it would take me to get there at my current speed. Now, as I add power, you'll see that number start to drop. Here I'm at full throttle, and you see the number's still dropping pretty rapidly. Now, the key here is to make sure that that number does not fall below 6 seconds away from the target. And I'll show you what happens if that is the case. So just watch that timer go down. We're now below 6 seconds, and if I slow down all the way, there's no way that I can slow down enough in time to make it for that safe disengage message. So now by turning around and maintaining that 6 second to target time, I'll be able to always drop right on target. So here we have 8 seconds away, so I'm going to add a little power. 7, 6. And now I'm just going to do everything I can to keep that number at 6. And if you watch my distance and speed in the lower left-hand corner, you'll eventually see them both go blue, and that means that I can safely drop at the target. Alright, now before we get in close and start landing, it's worth taking a look at that 3D image of the station as it sits in front of us. Now, in general, stations like this follow the right-hand rule. So if you take your thumb and orient it along the axis of spin, and you curl your hands you curl your fingers around your thumb in the axis of its spinning, and your thumb sticks out, that is the side where the mail slot is, the quote-unquote mail slot, the front door. And that works for every station. Now, if you don't want to do that, in general, stations' mail slots are aimed roughly at the planet they're orbiting. So you'll see if I do the right-hand rule, it means that the station door is towards the planet, and of course, in general, they're always pointed at the planet. Now, secondly, as we make our approach, you'll see that that 3D rendering will actually move as we move relative to it. And it's a little hard to tell with this Coriolis station, the one that looks like a D20, or I guess that would be a D12. Anyway, all of those 3D renderings will show you where the mail slot is, even if you're in Super Cruise. So you'll see as we come around it, look at the bottom edge of that rendering, and you'll start to see the mail slot appear. It's going to be hard to see due to the light on my dashboard. Let's roll out of the way, but you can just make out the mail slot in that rendering, and you can see that even in Super Cruise. So if you want to save time, you can line yourself up in Super Cruise with the station's mail slot right away and basically drop so that all you have to do is fly straight in. Now, specifically with these larger stations, you'll see how they're spinning just around that axis. That is more or less to maintain gravity on the station, but it also is there to add a little bit of challenge to and a little bit of skill to the landing process. So if we go ahead and request docking, on a large ship like the Anaconda, there isn't much clearance between the top and the bottom of that mail slot. And here as we get close, you'll see there's a red side and a green side. That indicates the flow of traffic. So you want to stick to the green side of the mail slot to ensure that you're in line with all of the other ships and you're not going to accidentally whack somebody who's coming out. Once you're in, you just have to find your designated landing pad, drop your gear, and then once you get close, you'll see this rendering appear down in the center, and it really just becomes a game of pin the tail on the donkey, where you just have to line up with the target and then lower your altitude, and then once you get close enough, the computer's just going to take over. And there's a little bit of room for error. You don't have to be precisely in the center. But it's easier if you're centered up. Occasionally you have to kind of rub yourself all over the landing pad to find the right angle, but it's usually pretty good. Now that more or less covers stations, because even the smaller ones, really the only difference is you can't land a big ship, again, like the Anaconda there, because they don't have a large size landing pad. The only other thing that I want to mention is as we're leaving, these stations do have speeding laws. Now, if you leave going faster than 100 meters per second, you'll see that speeding show up just above my fuel and mass lock indicator. Now, if I hit somebody and I'm speeding, I will gain a fine. It's usually like 400, as long as that person doesn't get killed, like their ship doesn't get destroyed. Otherwise, the station will become aggressive and it'll blow them up. But you can be fined for speeding. It'll also increase the likelihood that you get scanned. And as we get further away, you'll see we're no longer mass locked. But once you see you leave the no fire zone, you leave the general ring of policed area. And again, the laws kind of go away. So the next type of landing is planetary landing. There's really two types. There's planetary and station, but there's subsets of different landing types. And the reason I chose this system to work in is because it has Farseer Inc., which is on a high-gravity planet, which can be kind of difficult to land on. Alright, so while we're underway to Farseer Inc., which is on this far planet moon, I wanted to talk about the different types of flight. So we have supercruise and general space flight, which is just like this, where it behaves quite normally, right? You can fly directly into something and do a safe drop and pop right out of supercruise. Now, when you're trying to land, you have to go through what's called orbital flight. And that is exactly what it sounds like. You can't just fly directly into a planet and slow down. You need to basically create an entry trajectory, right? And I'll show you how all that happens. But it all becomes, it all happens as you get within a certain distance of the planet. And usually that's about 3 megameters. And you'll see it as we close in. But in general, don't try and land on a planet by flying directly into it like you would a normal space station. You want to come into the planet at an angle and kind of generally arc your way in. Alright, so now that we're closing in, again, we want to remember the rule of 6. So we're closing in and trying to match our speed with that 6 second to target. And as you know, we may be going real quick right now, but as we get closer and closer to the planet, it'll actually slow us down as we start to feel the effects of the planet's gravity. And so you'll see I'm not coming directly in at this planet. I'm leaving it up above my center so that I can raise my nose in and create a general parabolic arc. And then we're going to slow down just a little bit more because we're coming in quick. Again, we want to keep it at that 6. We can add power as we slow down. But soon you'll see the orbital flight HUD engage. It'll switch pretty soon once we get into about 3 megameters, 3.5 megameters. And you'll see I'm not coming straight at the center of the planet. I'm going towards my target almost at a tangent to the planet. Like planets are all circular, the tangent is that line that hits the circle at one point. Of course, this is not a perfect tangent. We'd bisect the curve, but talk about a literal, non-metaphorical tangent. Alright, so now you've seen the orbital HUD engage. Now you see here we have got orbital cruise, and you see our trajectory. Now this kind of looks, if you've ever played something like Ace Combat, this looks kind of like the Ace Combat HUD. Now anything below this, and it will tell us to pull up because we are too steep for orbital flight. We want to stay above that -60, that -60 degree plane, so that we can actually drop and cruise in. And really, right now, I have my throttle zeroed out, and I'm just slowly flying in. We can add a little bit of power, but we don't want too much here. Then once you get close, you'll see that drop from orbital cruise and the glide engage. And here I have no power. Even if I add throttle, the engines are off. Now here you want to just stay in line with your target as much as you can. And if you do it right, it'll just drop you out within 10-ish kilometers of your target. However, if you do it wrong, you'll drop from orbital cruise, or the glide mode, because you're too steep or too fast. Now the reason I chose this planet is because it has some heavy gravity. You'll see that I have my throttle zeroed, but it's still pulling us down. Now you want to be careful as you're coming into a planetary station, because you will occasionally encounter some heavy gravity. We'll request permission to land, and it'll light up a pad for us. And so normally I'd like to do a little bit of fancy flying, fly upside down, spin around, but because this planet has such high gravity, I want to keep the bottom of my ship pointed at the ground, because that way I can deploy my landing gear. You also don't want to be going too fast. You'll see I have my throttle pretty low in general. I'm below that blue line just barely, even though it's still blue. And you see our distance to the ground. I'm going to go ahead and drop my landing gear.
Landing gear deployed.
And we're going to slowly come in for a landing. Here again, it's better to go slower rather than faster because of that planet's high gravity. So again, once you get close, you'll see that game of pin the tail on the donkey come up again. You're just going to center yourself on that target and then slowly lower yourself down. Now, this is landing at a starport on a planet. It is also possible to just land on a planet, right? Sometimes you'll have a mission that tells you need to land somewhere and pick some stuff up with an SRV. And if that's the case, you'll need to do the following. We'll actually go out and find a nice flat plane to land on. Actually, this plateau looks pretty good. So just as if you were going to land on a starport, you need to find a nice flat spot to land on. Otherwise, the ship's computer is going to tell you to go pound sand. And the way this works is once you've found a place that looks pretty flat, again, this looks good, you're going to drop your landing gear. That would be the cargo scoop. You drop your landing gear and lower your altitude until you see your a 3D representation of your ship down in the radar there. Now, as you get closer and closer to the ground, you'll see a blue line appear, or red rather. Here it's telling me to slow down, again because the planet's gravity is so high. I need to kind of just tap my thrusters. Now, if I turn to the left, it'll see that I'm not in line with the slope of the ground, and it works in both directions. It also works if you're up and down. So what you want to do is you want to line up this little bar with those two, and it kind of looks almost like a barbell, and it'll turn blue when the alignment is okay. Now when it says alignment okay, you're just going to go ahead and land slowly. And there you go, down on the planet's surface. Now here you'd be able to launch an SRV. I actually don't have one on my ship here, but if I had one, I could launch an SRV and actually drive around the surface of this planet. Now if I wanted to leave, you really just, all you have to do is press and hold your up thrusters. Right, it's not just a tap. You'll see the drives engaging, drives offline. You have to hold your up thrusters as they spin up. And then, just the same as leaving a station, you need to leave mass lock. And the way you do that is literally just pitching up. Gaining altitude, and you actually lose mass lock very quickly from a planet. We'll align with our escape vector, and this can occasionally be kind of finicky. Whew, for a second there I thought the servers had crashed on me, but we've made it out of the planet, and literally we're just going to fly up until that DRP, that altitude line goes past DRP and OC into standard super cruise, and you'll see the orbital flight HUD change. And again, I'm going full metal out at almost a 90-degree angle. I'm gaining altitude as quickly as I can. And really from here, you're going to be able to use you'll be able to jump to a different system. But occasionally you get a target that's behind the planet, and you'll get the warning that says frame shift jump canceled because target is obstructed. And that means you just need to gain altitude. I'm sorry. And again, the fastest way to gain altitude is go 90 degrees from your target. At the end of the day, that really is landing in a nutshell. Hopefully I'm able to cut this up into a shorter video because it doesn't need to be 40 minutes. But hopefully this helps you guys, because planetary landings really are a lot of fun. You'll be able to find some great resources on planets, and driving the SRV is definitely an interesting experience. So go ahead and give it a try, and let me know if there's any other topics you want to cover. I think the next one I'm actually going to go mining in this account and talk about combat fitting a large ship. So keep that in mind, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.